facts. My name is Prachi. Hot and cold water actually sound different when they're being poured, and this is a video in which I talk about the potential conflicts between the Konmari Method and my no-buy year. I'm back from New York. I had a great time, ate a whole bunch of food, saw some pretty cool stuff, went to a concert, succumbed to capitalism. Just overall, a really great trip. Now that I'm back, I just wanted to give everybody a little bit of an update on my channel. So during the summer, I am still taking courses. I'm also studying for the LSAT, etc., which means that I am still only going to commit to giving all of you only one video a week on Saturdays. Now, whether I'm going to keep Saturdays as my upload day or not may change throughout the summer as my schedule itself changes, because I now have come up with a very robust scheduling and planning system to allow me to do everything that I need to get done this summer. But the general gist is I'm committing to uploading one video per week. For now, the day on which I'm committed to uploading is a Saturday. That might change. However, one of the things that I do want to try to do this summer is to release more than one video a week. Basically, to try to release some bonus content at least 2 or 3 times a month. And while my Saturday uploads, I want to still hew pretty closely to the makeup and beauty content and no-buy content that I initially started this channel for, I wanted to use the bonus videos that I would upload throughout the week to maybe discuss some other things I was interested in. And the way I sort of want to format these bonus videos is as chatty get ready with me's. So in one sense, it's still sort of tangentially related to makeup and beauty because you will get to see me putting on a full face of makeup. But while I'm applying that makeup, I do want to talk about things that may not always be found to be in the scope of a beauty channel or a channel about a beauty no-buy. And that's because I'm a person who reads a lot. I have a lot of different interests. Like, my world is not purely one of makeup and beauty. And I kind of want to be able to talk about those things and get people's feedback and ideas and all of that kind of stuff. So I figured doing it in the form of like a chit-chat get ready with me is sort of a way to straddle both the beauty and non-beauty world. Today's video is one such bonus video, and actually what I'm going to talk about is quite linked into my no-buy, because the thing that I want to discuss is the Konmari Method and how, since I've been thinking about and actually engaging in doing the Konmari Method of decluttering my house, I've come to realize that there are certain points of conflict between the Konmari Method and the way in which I have constructed my no-buy. So that sort of seeming contradiction and the dilemmas that I'm facing are what I kind of wanted to discuss today. And I wanted to get some feedback and guidance on my thought process and on what I should do next from all of you, my lovely subscribers. So without any further ado, let's get it. So I'm going through the KonMari process right now, and I've done clothes, I'm in the midst of doing books and papers, and pretty soon I'm going to go into komono, or miscellaneous items, and that's where all of makeup and skincare falls for me. And this is sort of where I'm in a little bit of a dilemma, and I'm hoping that I can just sort of talk through things with you, and maybe you guys can give me some feedback on what you think, etc. So, as you all know, I'm currently on a year-long no-buy. I'll link the video of my rules up in the cards, but the basic idea is that I'm not allowed to buy makeup, skincare, hair care, perfume, candles, books, and I think that's it. Maybe I'm missing something. Editing me will figure that out. And it's a replacement only no-buy, which means that I'm not allowed to buy those things for an entire year for fun. However, if I burn through an entire category of products, I am allowed to purchase one replacement for that entire category. So if, for example, I burn through all of the moisturizers I have in my house, I'm allowed to buy a replacement, just one, during my no-buy year, and then use it all the way up. I have exceptions for books I need for school. I also have a health and safety exemption, so I can buy anything that I need for health and safety reasons. However, the general gist is I'm not allowed to buy any makeup or any skincare until I have finished an entire category of products, at which point I'm only allowed to buy one replacement. The dilemma then comes with how that no-buy conflicts with the KonMari Method. or at least the way in which I'm beginning to realize there might be a potential conflict. So the Konmari method of decluttering, which is what I'm using, is the method that was outlined in her book, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up. And I'm sure a lot of people know what that method is because they've, you know, watched her Netflix show or they've read the books. But just in case, the Konmari method of tidying up consists of a couple different things. The first is that you should tidy up by category and not by location. So you want to tidy all of your clothes at once, all of your books at once, all of your papers at once, instead of saying that, oh, I'm going to tackle this drawer of papers today and then that drawer of papers tomorrow. Additionally, the criterion by which you are asked to keep things, and I think this is really, really important because a lot of people frame the KonMari method in a very negative way. So they frame it in the sense of here's how you decide what to throw away. And if you've actually read her book, you know that she says she doesn't like this sort of negative framework. You should not be focusing on what it is you want to throw away. You should instead be focusing on what it is you want to keep. And her criteria for deciding what it is you want to keep is to hold the object in your hand and decide if it sparks joy. Now, sparks joy is an English translation of the Japanese phrase tokimeki, which is really difficult to translate. And in fact, the usage of the term sparks joy has been a sticking point for a lot of people who speak English because joy is a very loaded term in English. However, the Japanese word tokimeki or tokimek, I'm probably pronouncing that hella wrong because I don't speak Japanese. The emotion that that word actually evokes in Japanese is sort of like a heart fluttering or palpitation. So the idea is you only keep those things that when you hold them, your body sort of responds to it. There's a sort of almost like a physicality to it that I think sparks joy doesn't quite capture. And that's why the KonMari process, which is where she actually has you physically hold everything and then see how your body responds to it, it makes sense when you realize she's not talking about sparking joy, but instead about tokimeki, which is like a fluttering or an excitement or like a heart palpitation, but not like a medical one, obviously. Marie Kondo, she talks about how it should feel like the cells in your body rise when you hold a thing. And that's why it's really important for you to do the process in solitude and in silence, because you don't want like music or something in the background influencing the way in which you're feeling. It's a very, very mindful process. The idea is it's you in conversation and concert with all of your things, holding them and evaluating one at a time. How does holding this thing and assessing what it has done for me make me feel? And if when you hold a thing you do feel a fluttering, when you realize that that thing adds something of value to your life, that your body responds well to it when you are holding it, that is what you decide to keep. And all of the things that you hold which do not elicit a good, positive, fluttering response from your body are things that you discard. Now, people get really like weird and pedantic over the method. They're like, well, if I'm holding like the contract or deed to my car, that contract like doesn't make my heart flutter. What am I just supposed to throw it away? This method doesn't work. But I find that those people are being really pedantic, and they're often people who haven't actually read Marie Kondo's books, because she has two of them, The Life-Changing Magic of Tidying Up, and another one called Spark Joy, which in Japanese is straight up called Tokimeki. And in that book, she talks a little bit more about her method or her criteria for spark joy and what that means. And she discusses how if, for example, when you're holding your employment contract, you don't feel anything. You don't feel any fluttering, any excitement when you're holding this contract that gives you the job that you have. That's probably a sign that you're not very happy with your job. Similarly, if you're holding like your marriage contract, this thing that ties you to another person and you feel nothing, that's also probably a sign that there is something you should be looking at there, right? When you hold things like contracts or papers or even like a toothbrush and you don't necessarily think you feel a spark of joy, because it is a meditative process. She has you stop and think, what is this for? And when I think about what it's for, how does that thing that it's for, my marriage, my car, my job, brushing teeth, etc., how does that make me feel? And if you feel nothing, no flutter, if your body does not respond in any positive way to that, that's probably a sign that there's something off there and you should look into that. Either way, we've gone on a bit of an aside about what the Marie Kondo method is, but I really wanted to sort of explain that because I think it's a thing that often gets overlooked. And I think a lot of people, especially in America, get really, I don't know if it's the fact that I'm like Indian, and Asia as a whole has a very different worldview than the West, but the idea that objects have energy, that you should be talking to your objects, that level of sort of like your environment should be a reflection of how you are feeling, all of that kind of stuff. That's an idea that's really embedded in a lot of Eastern philosophies. And if you grow up and are raised in the West, like, it's really difficult for you to sometimes come to terms with things like that, because you're like, oh, this lady thinks her house has like emotion and that the things in her life should be like thanked and talked to, and you feel kind of silly because in the West there is a very firm Cartesian sort of dualism, right? There is a very firm distinction between the self and the other, between people and nature, between the living and the non-living. And that distinction is really blurred in a lot of Eastern philosophies. This is turning into a much bigger discussion just about the Konmari method, but I really, really love the Konmari method. Like, it doesn't seem weird to me that the objects in your home have an impact on your mood, on the way that you live, on the way that you perceive things. Like, I think your environment does have a pretty big impact on how you are as a person. And I also really like that her method is so personal, that it's meditative, and that it forces you to really kind of reckon with your things, and that each person who does the method will end up with a different level of stuff in their house and with different kinds of stuff in their house, because the things that make my heart flutter are probably not the same things that make your heart flutter. I really like the way Marie Kondo explains and talks about things in her books, and that's kind of why I picked that process as the process by which I would declutter my house before I moved. The conflict that I'm sort of having, and some of you may have clocked it already as I was describing KonMari's method, is that the KonMari method in some sense almost conflicts with my no-buy. And to illustrate that, let me use an example. So I own 4 bottles of toner, and I've held all 4 bottles of toner in my hand. And when I did that, 2 of them did make my heart flutter. I genuinely loved them. I want to use them all the way until they're done, and I want them in my life. I want to keep them. The other 2 did not inspire anything. In fact, as I held them, I felt that they were a chore. And part of the KonMari process is like reckoning with your things and figuring out why you got them, why you're getting rid of them, thanking them for the role that they have played in your life. For both of those 2 toners, I was able to do that. Right? I was able to look at them and recognize, oh, I bought you for XYZ reason because I was feeling XYZ way, and I did not like you for these specific reasons, and I don't enjoy the process of using you, and you have taught me a lot about what it is I look for and desire in a toner, and most importantly, what it is I don't look for and desire in a toner. And so I can let you go. And so emotionally, I feel like I can let you go with gratitude. However, and this is the dilemma, if I let these 2 bottles of toner that do not spark joy go, and then, you know, I use the 2 toners that do spark joy, and I use them all the way up. And I know some of you might be thinking, girl, it's like 2 whole bottles of toner. You're really gonna use 2 whole bottles of toner up in a couple months? Yeah, I will. Because in the summer, I do the 7 skin method. I go through a lot of toner. So let's say I use up my 2 spark joy bottles of toner, and I'm only in November, and my no-buy year lasts till February. Then, according to the rules of my replacement only no-buy, because I have no more toners left in the house, I'm technically allowed to go out and buy 1 toner as a replacement. But the thing is, I got rid of 2 bottles of toner that were not all the way done. And it wasn't like they were bad bottles of toner. It wasn't like I got rid of them because they broke me out or for some like weird health and safety situation. I got rid of them because I didn't enjoy using them, because they did not spark joy. Had I not gotten rid of them, they would still be lying around in the house. And after my 2 Spark Joy bottles of toner were done, I would actually have been using these 2 meh toners all the way up until I was done. I wouldn't be allowed to buy a new toner. And so this is sort of where I'm having the dilemma. Does me getting rid of makeup and skincare that does not spark joy according to the KonMari method, is that basically me cheating my way out of my no-buy? And this is something that's been coming up especially in the realm of skincare for me, because if I really do declutter down just to the things that spark joy in my skincare routine, I would end up decluttering a lot of things, and odds are that I would run out of certain items before the end of my no-buy year, and then I would be buying something, and then I'd buy something to replace it. And had I not decluttered, had I just forced myself to keep everything, then I wouldn't be making those purchases because I would be forced to use up everything I have. And so I suppose my dilemma is really like, well, do I do the Marie Kondo method fully the way that she asked that it be done for makeup and skincare? Or do I not really do it for makeup and skincare? Do I do something halfway? And it's something I've sort of been struggling with because like one of the things that came up, this is gonna be so weird, but one of the things that sort of came up in the international law class that I took is that when you examine a document, like let's say a treaty, you have to look at what they call the object and purpose of the treaty, which is like, why was the treaty established in the first place, right? What were they really trying to do here? Because one of the fundamental tenets of international law is that you need to always keep the object and purpose of a treaty in mind. Doesn't matter what the situation at hand is, doesn't matter if it's something that the treaty could not have possibly anticipated because technology has changed, blah, blah, whatever. You need to look at what the original intent of the treaty was and then try to figure out how to rule in this new scenario, keeping that original intent of the treaty in mind. And so I've been sort of using that framework to think about my no-buy year. If we look at the no-buy year as like some treaty or contract that I signed with myself, what is the object and purpose of my no-buy year? Like, why am I doing this? One is that I used to really impulsively buy makeup and skincare to make myself feel better and more productive, and I want to break that habit. Two, I think the acquisition of makeup and skincare takes up way too much time in my life, and that I would often procrastinate or avoid really important things in my life by shopping for makeup because it was easier, because it was a separate outlet for my energy that didn't really have very many ramifications on my actual life's work. Moreover, buying makeup felt productive for me. So on days when I was unproductive because of my ADHD or just because life, I would often end up buying makeup as a way to feel productive. And then a couple lesser reasons, still important, but lesser to these reasons I just outlined above, were one, the space that a lot of my makeup and skincare took up, and two, the finances of it all. I felt like I spent too much money shopping for makeup, skincare, hair care, perfumes, etc, etc, etc. However, the big things were I don't want the acquisition of makeup to be taking up a lot of my time and energy. I don't want to impulsively buy things I don't really need into my life just because I'm having a bad day or because I'm feeling unproductive, because even if I buy a piece of makeup and it's terrible and that's sort of a failure, that's a much more inconsequential failure than trying to do something that's linked to my life's work, where failing will have adverse consequences on my real life and my future. An additional factor for why I went on a makeup no-buy is because I'm a pretty intense perfectionist, and not just in terms of makeup and skincare, but in all aspects of my life. And quite frankly, it's like toxic and not very good for me how much of a perfectionist that I am. And so part of the reason why I'm on this no-buy is to try to break the habit of perfectionism. So those are all of my reasons, and if I keep those reasons in mind and then I look at the Konmari method, it kind of falls in a whole bunch of different ways. First of all, when it comes to the financial aspect of it, it is better for me not to do the Konmari method, especially in terms of skincare, because I do go through skincare enough that I might be forced to buy things during my no-buy year that I would not have bought had I not decluttered down to the things which only spark joy. Additionally, if we look at the perfectionism aspect of it, I sort of addressed this in a couple of my previous videos where I was discussing the makeup that I took back from my sister, is doing the Konmari method where you declutter down only to the things that spark joy, a way for me to accidentally feed my perfectionism. Because if I only keep the things that spark joy, am I in some sense only keeping the things that I deem to be perfect? And does that act then somehow mean that I am giving into perfectionism and this idea that everything that I own needs to be perfect? Now, the flaw I can sort of see in that logic is that the criteria is that you keep things that spark joy, not things that are necessarily perfect. And I can think of quite a few pieces of makeup and skincare which are not perfect, but which I would keep because they spark joy. But I mean, is the whole attitude of only keep the things which really spark joy feeding into perfectionism as a whole? I don't know. Like, what do y'all think? However, when I look at some of the other reasons why I went on a no-buy year, stopping impulsive purchasing, being more mindful about my purchasing, not letting the acquisition of makeup and skincare take up too much of my time and energy, doing the KonMari method doesn't really lead to me indulging in those types of behaviors, right? Using the toner scenario, let's say I declutter the 2 toners that I think are meh, and then I use the 2 toners that spark joy all the way up. I still can't go out and impulsively buy toners. I would still have to wait for those 2 toners to go all the way down, and then I'd have to think carefully and not impulsively about what one toner I would like to have as a replacement. Doing the KonMari method wouldn't suddenly mean that I was allowed to return to my impulsive shopping habits again, because the idea would be that I would still have to use up everything that remained behind, and that I would maybe be making like 3 or 4 more purchases over my entire no-buy year that I wouldn't have been able to do had I just kept all of the meh products sitting around my house anyway. But it wouldn't be like there's suddenly an opportunity for me to go on like a buying free-for-all. It's not like I would be able to spend all of my time and energy engaging in shopping behaviors and shopping again. Like, this is kind of why I really wanted to bring this to the forefront with all of you guys, to see if what I was saying was making sense, and to sort of get all of your opinions on what you think on my line of reasoning, and maybe offer some advice on how I should approach the KonMari method in terms of makeup and skincare. For makeup, I actually am already thinking that I might sort of modify the KonMari method a little bit, because as a lot of you know, I acquired a lot of makeup from my sister, and I don't really have a sense of how I feel about them just yet. And actually, when I think about it, it's not just those products, because even if you go back and you watch like my second ever video, which is my makeup collection, I talk about how there are quite a few products, foundations and primers and eyeshadow palettes, where I don't quite know how I feel about them. And I feel like if I don't quite know how I feel about everything in my makeup collection, it seems odd and unfair for me to pass judgment on it in a KonMari situation. So what I'm thinking of doing is going through category by category, setting aside things where I just have not used them enough to form an opinion. Kind of like Hannah's Reckoning, where she just has that box set aside of things that she's a little bit undecided on. So separating out all of that stuff first, then from all of the things that I know how I feel about them, going through each of them and doing the KonMari process with just those things. And then maybe I would start some kind of like shop my stash kind of project, where I would specifically try to use all of the things that I'm sort of undecided about. And then either as the shop my stash progresses, I would make a decision about which things I think are worth keeping and not. Or at the end of my no-buy year, I just kind of do another round of KonMari after I've had a chance to use everything that I'm sort of undecided on. So I'm thinking of sort of modifying the KonMari process for my makeup as it is, because I just don't know how I feel about so many things. And as I've discussed previously, I have a problem with really impulsively decluttering things. And I want to make sure I don't do that with makeup this time around. But skincare is sort of where I'm having a bit of the dilemma. Do I actually declutter the skincare that I don't like and that doesn't spark joy? Do I maybe do something like what Hannah Louise Poston did and declutter into a box, so that I am in fact using my spark joy toners and creams and lotions and all of that kind of stuff first during my no-buy year, and maybe they carry me all the way through my no-buy year, and then at the end of it I can just sort of decide to declutter those 2 toners. Otherwise, if I run through my 2 Spark Joy toners before the no-buy year runs out, I have to reach into my box, pull them out, and then actually use them. It's sort of this like weird philosophical dilemma that I'm having with myself, which is that, do I adhere to the sort of Marie Kondo philosophy of not punishing myself for having bought the things that I bought in the past, and of cultivating an environment around me that isn't really filled with a bunch of stuff I don't care about, and is instead filled only with the things that spark joy? Or do I go more towards the almost like no-buy philosophy, which is like you made some crappy choices, kiddo, and you gotta learn to live with them, and take this as a lesson while you're struggling to use these like 2 meh toners to not make purchasing decisions like that again. Those are sort of the 2 warring philosophies that I'm kind of dealing with right now. And I guess there's like a third one, which is like, for a lot of makeup and stuff, I know that there are people who I could give that to who would really, really appreciate it. But with things like the toners, especially because one of them is like more than half used, I don't know if there's anybody in my life who wants or could use those 2 toners, which means that if I don't use them and I have to get rid of them, yes, the plastic bottles I can recycle, but the toner itself, the liquid inside, I would literally be pouring down into the drain. And when I think about sort of the waste of that, there is some part of me that's a little bit like you're literally pouring money that you had spent on these things down the drain. And like, because I grew up pretty poor, like there's a lot of literature that talks about how when you grow up with not very much, like you end up having a scarcity mindset, and it's really, really difficult for you to feel like you have enough and that you're going to be okay even if you get rid of certain things. It's really, really difficult for you to like conceptualize the idea of like wasting money, and you end up in this mindset of I have to use up every last bit of this because I spent money on it. And that mindset, like, she jumps out. Like, even in the midst of me doing the KonMari, even though I've like read a bunch of the books, even though I agree so much with her philosophy that you should not be punishing yourself and that you shouldn't be surrounded by a bunch of clutter that adds nothing to your life. As much as I believe that other part of my brain, which is like, how dare you get rid of things that are perfectly functional but which you don't personally find joy in. How ungrateful and wasteful of you to do that. Am I making sense? Am I delusional? Am I just like talking myself in circles? Should I just shut up and put on blush? You know what? I'm just gonna do that. Oh, perhaps that was a bit too much blush, but we rolling with it. I wanna know, one, that I'm not the only crazy person having this thought, and two, I wanna sort of be very open with all of you guys about sort of the dilemmas that are popping up, as they should be when you try to like fit in multiple competing philosophies into your life, because I'm very big on the idea that there is no real one right way to do everything. But then when you try to incorporate a bunch of different worldviews or philosophies into everything, you do end up with these sort of paradoxes and dilemmas and trying to figure out how to best have things fit you. It's a struggle. So that's why I'm sort of opening the floor to all of you, because I'm looking forward to how you guys conceptualize things and what you think of the issue, and whether you do see that there's some sort of contradiction between the Konmari method and my own no-buy rules, or whether you're like, it's not that deep, sis, just throw it away, or some other possibility that I totally haven't thought of. So do let me know what you think down below. I think I'm sufficiently made up to have a productive rest of the day and study for my stats midterm tomorrow. To everyone who stuck it out with me to the end, thank you so, so much for watching and listening to the ramblings of a girl who's really just trying to figure things out. And as always, I hope you have a great upcoming week. And even if your upcoming week ends up becoming messy and imperfect, I hope that you're still able to create and experience some truly beautiful moments. Bye.